Hello friends, let's talk about signaling. Little lever, left side of the steering wheel. Up means you intend to turn right or move into the right lane. Down means the same for the left. No. So this is kind of a follow-up to the first half of last week's video about personal safety. If you haven't, go watch that one. Or not, it's fine. I'd like to expand on posture and talk a lot more about the nonverbal communication that we can accomplish during a de-escalation. So signaling is the idea that we can tell people a lot about what to expect about us based on how we present ourselves. This can be everything from bumper stickers to clothes to our everyday carry to tattoos to hairstyles to posture to gestures to lots of stuff that I haven't considered. If this is something that interests you, I would like to suggest the book Snoop, What Your Stuff Says About You by Sam Gosling. So real quick, a recap on what a good base de-escalation posture looks like. A good de-escalation posture is about remaining non-threatening. Remember that someone who's escalated or escalating is losing their ability to think and behave rationally, and they're losing it fast. So we need to make sure that our posture isn't going to be read by the lizard brain as aggressive or threatening. This means that we keep our shoulders and hips slightly tilted away from square and keep our hands in front of us, and we keep them as open and broad as possible. We maintain conversational eye contact, which means we meet their eyes about 2/3 of the time. Facial expressions stay neutral to slightly sad or concerned, but not too much because we don't want to be pitying. Our feet stay planted, weight evenly distributed both between the feet and between the front and the back of the foot. This will give us a visual air of solidity that will help a lot with our rapport. Shoulders stay down, neck slightly forward, head tilted down and to one side, biceps relaxed, core relaxed, knees slightly bent. I will never know if it's faster to plug that clip in or to explain the whole thing again, and I'm not going to do a science and find out. So here's the interesting stuff. What does that posture communicate? What can we do with that information? And why do I care? Let's start with the base and work our way up. Keeping our feet planted and not shifting or fidgeting gives us an important air of reliability and solidity. This makes us appear more trustworthy to the escalated person, which helps us to build and maintain rapport even when doing or saying disagreeable things like setting consequences. I've used the word inexorable in the past, and not just because I think it's a dope word that could use some more airtime, but because that timeless, ageless, dispassionate inevitability is an impression that is extremely valuable to be able to create. Body language cues work mostly under the hood, so we can use them to create a really solid first impression as long as we do it deliberately. Keeping our weight evenly distributed between legs supports that impression. If one of our legs is behind the other, which is fine, there's nothing wrong or right about that, but then we can also communicate aggression and defensiveness by shifting our weight to the front or to the back, respectively. Since neither of those things are great for de-escalation, let's do neither and keep our weight evenly distributed. Keeping our weight on the front of our feet makes us unstable. Some people do it without realizing it when they're nervous, but it's dangerous for you if the situation escalates to physical violence. Keeping our weight on the back of our feet makes us slow to react. Also dangerous for you if the situation escalates to physical violence. To someone who doesn't know what they're looking at, you look trustworthy and solid. To someone who does, you look like you ain't starting none, but you won't take none either. Keeping the knees bent ensures that you won't pass out if you stand there too long, and as a marching band veteran, I can assure you that that is a real thing, and it sucks super hard. It also enables you to respond faster should the situation become physically violent. Keeping our core relaxed helps loosen up our silhouette and move us a bit away from an extremely formal pose, which can put up significant barriers to building rapport. It also, fun fact, makes you slightly shorter. That's not useful in any way, but I know that, and now you do too. Ensuring that our shoulders and hips are tilted slightly away from the escalated person keeps us from accidentally squaring off. When we face someone directly, we're opposed. When we face the same direction, we're a team. Most people don't have conversations standing side by side, so that would be a weird place to start, but we can borrow some of that effect by tilting away from a squared off pose. Which direction doesn't really matter that much, whichever you're more comfortable with, unless you have an audience. I will do an episode about the value of having an audience and how to make the best use of that audience another time. Keeping our hands in front of us makes us seem more trustworthy. We're not hiding anything. I generally prefer to keep my hands at around waist level, high enough that I can use my gestures as part of my communication, but low enough that they're not distracting. Hopefully. When we keep our shoulders and arms relaxed, we soften our silhouette substantially and help keep impressions of us from being aggressive or confrontational. Keeping the neck slightly forward contributes to that and is also a listening pose. We do want to be actively listening during all de-escalation conversations. Active listening, also a video for another time. When we tilt our head, again, same thing, less confrontational, demonstrates that we're listening. Now, Facial expressions. I am extremely particular about facial expressions, in large part because it seems like most people aren't aware of what's on their face, and that's a big barrier to successful de-escalation, especially if de-escalation is your job and you ain't feeling it today. I used to work with a guy who said things like, "I don't know what it is, but every time I come on shift, the fights start. Gee, I wonder why." If we're going for a more formal approach, like if you need to keep that social distance between you and the escalated person because you're their teacher or religious authority figure, for example, then you want to stay neutral with a little splash of concerned eyebrow when they speak. Keep the jaw loose. Any lip movement stays limited to the corners, which only go down, especially during the early phases of de-escalation before you've built any rapport. Any perceived levity on your part can be misinterpreted as mockery, and that's hard to come back from because perception is reality. If we want to lean more on our rapport, then we can show a much greater range of emotion. We can include sadness and indignation on behalf of the escalated person, and sympathy and regret and even anger in some circumstances. To start with, we do want to stay more in the sadness concern areas because we are still building that rapport, so we need to keep their dignity in mind. We aren't pitying, we do not pity the escalated person. We're considering how we would feel in similar circumstances and aligning our goals based on that shared consideration. Once we've built a good rapport, then we can widen our range of available demonstrable emotions even more, and we can joke and laugh and share joy together. If we do this too early, it can come across as condescending, but once we've got good rapport, leaning into the camaraderie can deepen our rapport even further. As a general rule, always laugh less than they do. So, as you can see, all of the different elements of good posture are geared towards presenting a persona that is competent and firm, but not unsympathetic. We're available to be friends, but we still have a certain amount of responsibility to maintain. And if we start there, then we can become more directive if necessary, or more friendly, and not lose anything for it, because neither direction is going to feel like a total and unexpected shift away from our first impression. I'm glad you made it this far. Here's a puppy. Knowing how our posture and presentation affects another person's perception of us puts more tools in our kit that are applicable for all sorts of situations. One of my coworkers is extremely tall, and when he's in customer service mode, he leans very far forward from the shoulders to diminish the effect that his size has on the personal space and comfort of the person to whom he is speaking. I present medium feminine, so I can shore up impressions of my physical ability by squaring my shoulders and resisting the urge to stand on one leg. Basically, borrowing elements of posture that are commonly associated with masculinity in order to take advantage of the general societal assumption that masculinity equals physical ability in order to deter physical engagement. Note, I'm not going to comment on how accurate the common societal assumptions are about how physical signaling correlates to anything. That's a discussion for another time and, frankly, another channel entirely. But if we pretend they don't exist, then we all leave ourselves open to bad actors, and that's not good for anyone. This kind of signaling is extremely easy to accomplish with clothing choices, and you can support your posture choices in this way. Think about how some people will wear a wedding ring at work because they work in the service industry and it deters creeps. Signaling. Same reason a person in a suit looks like they've got their life together, but a person in a wrinkly suit looks the exact opposite. So I proceeded up to this point on the shared assumption that you agree with me that it is important to demonstrate empathy towards the escalated person, no matter who they are. That we always want to give them some leeway and grace because being escalated is necessarily a difficult position to be in, and we've all said and done things that we wish we hadn't in a moment of stress or anger or despair, or in my case, a moment of being 8 beers in. Point is, empathy is a completely reasonable entry point to building rapport. It's accessible, easy to understand, simple to demonstrate, and can help build and deepen all sorts of relationships, and better relationships can only help in future de-escalations. And yet, there is still a large contingent of people who find themselves in a position to de-escalate and choose to present themselves based on what their pride demands of them, rather than based on what would be the most helpful for the escalated person. This means that they only have one tool, and if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And yes, you can do a lot of different stuff with a hammer, but unless that thing that you want to do is hit stuff, there's another tool that does that better. When I first started out as a baby security officer back in 2014, and I bought my first duty belt, which wasn't necessary, but hey, if I can be more like Batman, then I'm gonna do it. It came with a dual mag holster. We were unarmed. Still are, and I prefer it that way. I put the mag holster on my belt anyway, and I put granola bars in it. Police made fun of me, but you know what? If I go into a room with a guy on so much meth he doesn't know his own name, and I have visible food to share, then I can leverage that into rapport in about 2 seconds. I decided that it was better for me to signal that I'm non-threatening, friendly, helpful, and even a little bit childlike. It's a signal that I've refined quite a bit and still use to this day because I know that making friends with escalated people is one of my strengths. Starting friendly also means that when I do become directive and stern, the contrast highlights just how serious I am. These are all tools, and they're tools that we can miss out on if we're not aware of how we present to others. So be mindful of the signals that you are giving off, make note of how they affect the de-escalation, and you can become a very good de-escalator indeed. What do you think? Am I just reading too much into this? How do you use signaling in your life? Is it something useful to you outside of de-escalation situations? Put your stories, additions, or corrections in the comments. Be smart, stay safe. Bye.